Okay. Shall I go ahead and admit, folks? Everybody ready? Yep. Okay. Okay. Just waiting for folks to pop up and the audio to connect. Hey, Sulan.
Well, happy Wednesday, everybody. Stay hydrated, everybody. Don't forget about your water. We'll get started in just a few minutes here. We want to give people as much time to join as possible. Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. Yay. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome. Hi, everybody. It's Wednesday, and it is part 2 of our Persuasive, Relevant, Effective Speaking Workshop series. I think I missed the S in there somewhere, but so glad you could make it. My name is Caitlin Mills. I am a senior at Agnes Scott and a third-year tutor in the Center for Writing and Speaking. And as I mentioned just a second ago, our workshop tonight is part 2 of our brand new Persuasive, Relevant, Effective Speaking Strategies workshop series. And tonight I am joined by 5 other of your personal tour guides for our journey this evening, the fellow members of the workshop committee. I am going to quickly hand over our proceedings to Leah, my workshop committee co-chair, to go ahead and begin our introductions. Leah, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Press Part 2. My name is Leah Trotman. I'm a senior at Agnes, like Caitlin, and I'm also a third-year tutor. I will now hand it over to Ren.
Hi, friends. I'm Ren. I'm a senior, a second-year tutor, and I'm really excited to get into some of our content today.
Hi, I'm Drasana. I'm a junior. I'm also a second-year tutor, and I'm so excited to work with you guys.
Hi, I'm Felicia. I'm a senior and I'm a second-year tutor, and I'm really happy that you guys are here and for this workshop today.
Hello, everyone. Amira Sawyer here. I am a junior here at Agnes, second year in CWS, and I'm excited for the work we will accomplish tonight.
Yay! this is our team. I must say, we have such an awesome team, and I'm really excited to have worked with them to put this workshop together. Before we get started, I just want to kind of do a little recap of Press Part 1. And our last workshop last week, we wanted to give you some speaking skills that would help you in much more formal spaces, formal presentations, when you're standing with your visual aids, with a projector, on Zoom or in person. Today, we want to give you some speaking skills that you can put to work on the ground every day. Our goal is not necessarily to talk about those moments where you're standing in front of the projector screen or in an auditorium full of people, but those times when you're extemporaneously called on to articulate your ideas in a much less formal setting. So what this workshop is going to help you do is develop the skills and the confidence to effectively navigate on-the-spot articulations of ideas and thorough responses or descriptions without visual aids. Now, just because the setting or the occasion for our public speaking is different, all of the other concepts about public speaking from our last workshop still apply. So instead of giving a 20-minute presentation of your senior thesis, you may be asked to talk about the main takeaways from an experience in an interview or maybe in a conversation with your mentor, right? So even in that moment, your tone, your diction, your volume, pacing, the need to establish credibility and hold your listeners' engagement is critical to being an effective speaker. So in the last workshop, we also talked about how to select main ideas and supporting details, and choosing what to include when you are summarizing your research or job experience based on your audience. All of that information is just as useful in a non-formal space as well. What this workshop will do tonight is build on those ideas in our last session and give you an opportunity to practice those skills. And we're going to give you some literal step-by-step to help you become a better speaker in every setting. Okay? That sound like a plan for tonight? Awesome. I hope y'all are as excited as I am. But before we get into the 1, 2, 3s of speaking in different settings, let's do a quick check-in with Leah.
Thank you, Caitlin. 2 things before we do the check-in. One, I just wanted to let you all know that I typed a message in the chat that we do have live captions available. So if you just go ahead and put your cursor on the bottom of your screen, you'll see live captions. You can click on that, then click on show subtitles, and then it'll pop up on the screen for you. Second, I wanted to make it clear that throughout the presentation, we will be using terms like formal and informal, and we recognize the current movement currently on our campus as well as just across our nation, specifically within academic spaces, to decolonize these same spaces and to remove those labels such as formal and informal that tend to oftentimes exclude minority groups. However, we also recognize that at the end of the day, there are some skills and some tricks that we wanted to kind of offer to you all, and then you can use them to your advantage. And so that's really what this presentation is rooted in. We recognize that Agnes Scott is a diverse campus for a lot of students, including myself. And so this presentation is really rooted in offering you all, us, literally, we're learning as we are building this presentation, those tips on how to navigate those spaces while still trying to be our full authentic selves. Okay, so to kick us off, it has become a tradition in this committee. If you've been here for the ride of a semester, you'll know that it has become a tradition of ours to start each workshop with an interactive Zoom exercise. So if you are able, go ahead and place your cursor over and follow and click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And at this point, you should see all of the wonderful Zoom emojis up, and we're going to keep this up throughout the presentation. So please go ahead and have that ready. Okay, and then I'm going to ask the first question. So on a scale of predetermined Zoom functions, which you will see on your screen, rate your comfortability with the public speaking without visual aids. So i.e. in seminar discussions, office hours, panels. So briefly, I already see a shocked face from Maddie. Cool. So the shock face is like, oh, my presentation skills without visual aids is a big yikes. I really struggle to do them. I feel like sometimes I get really nervous. I forget why I'm up there in the first place. And then sometimes I even forget what I'm saying. The heart is kind of like an overall, yes, I feel pretty good. I can present without visual aids, but I sometimes lose my train of thought and end up losing myself and also the audience in the process of speaking. And then the confetti, which is always my personal favorite. I'm in my bag. Okay, my presentation skills without visual aids are superb. I can manage my anxiety well. I'm able to provide compelling analysis throughout my presentation without visual aids. I can keep my audience engaged, etc., etc., etc. So I think I saw a shocked face. I saw a heart from Jasana. Any other emojis? I think there are quite a few of you, so I have to click the buttons. So go ahead and put them up. Shocked face, heart. Okay, I'm seeing some hearts. That's good to know. This is good. This is good. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. We hope to address many, if not all, of those concerns tonight throughout this presentation. So you are most definitely in the right place if you had any worries at all about presenting without visual aids. Okay. Awesome. So thank you all so much for sharing. All right. So without further ado, I will go ahead and hand the workshop over to Ren to kick us off with discussion and how to tackle in-class anxiety, which we just mentioned, when those opportunities arise, right, in class for us to speak spontaneously and on the spot. It's something I struggle with myself, so I'm so happy to be sitting here and learning from Ren. All right. So go ahead. Take it, Ren.
Okay, thanks, Leah. So the idea of talking about your research or ideas about something to keep you and your audience on track can be really, really daunting, but we're going to cover strategies for handling lots of different situations with ease. So the first thing we're going to talk about is in-class participation. It's pretty common to feel anxious about speaking up in class, especially in a virtual setting, but I'm going to share some tips and tricks. First, though, before we get into anything, I want you to leave this workshop knowing that your experiences and your comments are important, they're valid, they deserve to be heard. You've earned the right to be in every class and every conversation that you encounter, and your perspective is super important. That being said, though, there are a few things you can do to set yourself up for success and participation. The biggest thing you can do to maximize your class participation is to prepare. So that looks like reading the assigned text beforehand, taking notes about what interests you, maybe discussing those topics with like a roommate or a family member or somebody who, like a friend. And you should also like complete any like pre-class reflections or reading assignments that your professor has assigned. So as you are processing this material through all these different methods, you're going to develop an idea of what you might want to mention in class. So it might not seem as like scary to bring something up. When you are in class, however, it can still be really useful to take notes. You might want to jot down ideas that you have. This will help you feel more grounded, more comfortable in what you have to say. This could be something based on what your peers or your professor are saying, an observation about the reading, just a repetition of something that resonated with you. All of these are valid and they have their own place within discussions. Don't hesitate to speak up. This goes back to my first point about the need for your perspective. So what you have to say is important and you deserve to bring up whatever you feel like catches your interest. These are just 3 examples of something that you might want to like take note of as you're taking notes on the class discussion. So now that you've prepped for class, right? You've been paying attention in discussion. You know what you want to say. You raise the little Zoom hand, or maybe your real hand if your camera is on, whatever. Your professor calls on you and it's your time to shine. What can you do to make sure everything comes out exactly the way that you want it? So we have 2 tips for this. First, you want to take a breath before unmuting. In Zoom and even in real conversation, it's totally normal if there's a moment or 2 or 3 of just silence before you speak. Don't fluster yourself trying to scramble to speak up. Just take a deep breath and gather your thoughts. Once you've unmuted, take the time to speak really slowly and clearly. No one is timing you, and when you're anxious, everything seems to be going so much faster than it actually is. If you speak slowly, you'll sound pretty much normal to everybody else, and they'll be able to hear you and understand you. They'll be able to process what you have to say and respond accordingly. In addition, speaking slowly will give you more time to think through your own comment. So take your time, give your thoughts, and don't forget to put yourself back on mute. So we have just a couple more quick strategies for managing speaking anxiety. You might want to hold on to something to fidget with, like a pen or a stress ball or something like that, whatever you like to play with. You want to keep it out of camera so it's not distracting to others, but don't hesitate to use those aids if that's something that helps you. Another tip is to plan a breathing break. So this is when you plan into your speech a time for you to stop and pause It's usually more often used in longer speeches, but this is something that can definitely help if you're trying to speak up in class. So you can ask a question, wait for the response, and that gives you time to slow your breathing and collect your thoughts, and then make your point. Another helpful tip is to keep a glass of water or tea or whatever you enjoy nearby. Stay hydrated. It will keep your mouth from going dry while you're talking. It can give you something to kind of anxiously like sip on if you're trying to collect your thoughts. I always enjoy that. And finally, we suggest that you use information from a small group discussion, an out of class conversation, or maybe a breakout room to inform your comments. If you've just discussed whatever it is that you're about to say, you're less likely to feel nervous about speaking up because you've already kind of rehearsed it in your head. So now that we've talked about psyching yourself up for chiming in, Caitlin and Leah are going to walk us through some ideas to make sure the content of your comments is clear.
Awesome. Thank you, Ren. All right. So, as for our section of the presentation, Caitlin and I are going to talk about how best to navigate now in class, right? Seminars, in class discussions, open ended questions. As Ren mentioned earlier, being prepared is one of the best ways to tackle anxiety. So, today we're going to walk you through 5 steps that detail what you should include in your answer when you respond in class. So, step 1. It is important to start your response to a discussion question in class with a point of connection. In short, these are phrases at the beginning of your response that draw a line of continuity between what was already said and what will be said. For example, a point of continuity could be, I agree with what Caitlin said about XYZ, or I disagree with what Ren said about XYZ. As a bonus, such points of continuity, just in general, help the previous speaker know that you acknowledged what they said and that you were listening, even if you disagreed with them, which in general is just a nice thing to do when participating in open conversation. And really quickly, before moving on to the second step, I just wanted to mention that sometimes you may be the first person to respond to the discussion question in class. Let's say that you were the first person to respond to a question like, do you think the current administration is doing enough to appropriately address the impacts of climate change on health? Obviously, you then can't say, I agree or disagree with a fellow peer because no one spoke before you. It's kind of talking to yourself. So, in this case, an example of a point of connection could be, well, I find this question really interesting because, right? Because even if you didn't say the name of someone, you are drawing still that point of continuity between the question, what was already said, and what you are about to say, what will be said, showing that you are listening attentively and that your answer will be relevant to class discussion. Okay, now moving on to step 2. After you've drawn a point of connection to either the comment before you or just in general to the overall question, you next want to mention your evidence. Evidence can come in the form of references to past article, texts you've read in class, your lived experiences, or even outside knowledge that maybe you've gotten from your parents or from other classes, as long as it's relevant to the class discussion in question. So, for example, continuing with the question from the previous slide. Let's say that Caitlin responded to the question and said, yes, I do believe that the current administration is doing enough to appropriately address the impacts of climate change on health. That would be her point of connection. And then following, she will then in detail offer up her evidence to support her claim that they, the administration, are in fact doing enough. And like I said, her evidence could come in the form of a most recent press release or from most recent conversations with people who have been directly impacted by this current administration's work. So, as a recap, you first want to start your response to a question in class with a point of connection and then move into evidence. So, there are 3 other things that you should include in your response, and I'm now going to hand this presentation over to Caitlin to share those 3 things with you.
All righty. Thank you, Leah. Now, after you've made your point of connection and your main point, and you've included some pieces of evidence to support your ideas, it's important that we give those pieces of evidence a little bit of substance, right? So the next step in your response is going to be fully explaining and supporting your ideas by explicitly drawing a connection between the topic of discussion or the class reading or whatever evidence you just mentioned. Okay, so does that quote or experience confirm or support the ideas of the person that you're responding to? Does that article or that book offer conflicting ideas or examples? So let's just kind of think about this within the context of our hypothetical discussion about the current administration's measures to address environmental health, right? So my response, I guess, is my sample response is that, oh, yes, I agree they're doing enough. And I say, okay, I introduce an article from the LA Times that skeptically asserts that the administration should impose more measures more quickly. So after I've made my point of connection and introduced the main idea from the article, I can then elaborate on that by talking more extensively about the spectrum of popular opinion about President Biden's environmental policies. It's not that the article disagreed, but it just added a little bit more nuance. So this example could be used to support the idea, contrast ideas that are already discussed, or to qualify, which means to talk about both sides. The previous comments that the administration was doing enough to address environmental issues. Okay, so we introduce evidence. Now we just have to explain it a little bit to give it some substance. And once you've done that, the fourth step, and the most important one, comes easy. You want to talk about the significance of and the importance of your comment. This doesn't have to be super long like it usually would be in a paper, but what it should do is synthesize how your ideas enhance or meaningfully contribute to the conversation. And here are just a few ways to think about what is the significance of your comment. You know, if you agree with a lot of the comments that are being given by your peers in class, you know, how broadly can the conclusions that your class come to about the reading be applied? Like, is it just a situational thing with the experiences that are in your class? Or does it introduce, you know, another context in which your ideas can still remain strong? Does your response add another layer or another lens to the discussion that should be more seriously considered? How does your response challenge the underlying assumptions that the class discussion is implicitly based on? I personally really love it when the Scotties do that. What questions does your response or another mate's comment raise about the topic? Have y'all identified any research gaps? So it's important to include this step because it kind of helps you conclude your thoughts in a way that's really succinct while opening up the discussion for others to contribute. And then the last and final step is you just want to add something to the end of your comments that invites other people to respond to you. So if we were to kind of pull all of these steps together, this is kind of how, oh, that's step 5, sorry, y'all. This is kind of how it would all look. We say, yes, okay, I believe the current administration is doing enough to address the impacts of climate change on health. However, this article from the LA Times asserts that they should do more quickly. And in this article written by a popular researcher, you know, reflects a spectrum of opinions amongst even those who are very supportive of this new environmental health reform bill. And as a class, we've acknowledged, you know, the reasons for pro-environmental politicians and activists, but we haven't fully investigated the factions within the group of supporters and the potential impact of their findings and how that could possibly impact the public support or doubts about the reform bill. I would be interested to see if anyone else knows about any more nuanced perspectives from within the environmental justice movement, especially at the grassroots level. Okay, so we have our steps, beginning with that point of connection, saying what your main point is, adding in some evidence, explaining and supporting your ideas, hitting the significance of your comment, and then inviting others to respond. That was a lot, really quick, I know. But the steps are there, and we want to give you an opportunity to practice these steps so you can be ready to use them in class tomorrow. So I'm going to drop these steps in the chat while Leah takes us through an exercise called philosophical chairs. Leah?
Thank you, Caitlin. So as Caitlin said, we're going to give you the opportunity to practice these 5 steps in breakout rooms. And I know y'all heard the term breakout rooms and immediately were like, no. But listen, we tried to make it as fun as possible. So we're going to split you all up into breakout rooms, 4 breakout rooms. And basically, philosophical chairs will give you the opportunity to participate in open discussion with your fellow peers using those 5 steps. We tried to make the topics as interesting as possible so you would just feel compelled to respond, not forced to, but compelled. So breakout room 1, you'll do, is cereal a soup or a salad? Breakout room 2, you'll do, what are your thoughts on Summit? Breakout room 3, you're going to be just rocking with a statement. Taylor Swift is a better performer than Beyonce. And then breakout room 4, social media has improved human connection and human communication, excuse me. So hopefully y'all are feeling invigorated to respond to some of these questions and statements. So Caitlin is going to go ahead now and put y'all into breakout rooms. We will be here in the main room if you have any questions, but our fellow tutors will be joining you and we'll pop in and check in on the conversation.
Okay, I'm going to open the breakout rooms now, and you can kind of, whichever question you feel the most compelled to chat about, you can go ahead and join that room. Okay. Awesome. All of the rooms should be opened.
Yeah.
So feel free to join them.
And if you're not sure how to join breakout rooms, once again, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see breakout rooms. You can click it, and then anytime you see like the name breakout room, scroll to the right, you'll see a number, click that, and that'll take you to join. And let us know. We can also put y'all in there too. I had a hard time at first trying to figure out how to do breakout rooms.
Yeah, breakout rooms can be really good.
Yeah, Amina, Gwen, Sulan, do you guys need any help, or are you guys okay? Or do you want us to just assign you? Oh, Amina, absolutely. We can surely do that.
I'm on the phone and I can't figure out how to do it on the phone.
Oh, no.
But
I actually
yeah,
don't know
you can
how.
put me in 3 if that's okay.
Okay,
Sure.
Amina, I'll put you in 1. Okay, and then
I don't see the option either. Could you put me on breakout room 1?
sure.
Thank
All right,
you.
there we go. And then Rose, do you mind if we put you in breakout room 4 with Jasana?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, awesome.
Sweet. Yay.
So I would like to pause the recording. I don't know how to do that. I just did it. I got it. Okay.
Oh, just kidding.
I just resumed recording. I can't wait to hear how it went for them.
I'm kind of jealous we weren't in there, but we got our own
We
little
practice. We have our own conversations that implement the steps while we waited.
Oh, the conversations must still be going on. You know, normally students are always like, oh, let me join back in really quickly from leaving the breakout rooms, but they must be really enjoying it then. All right, we shall wait until the 30 seconds run out. There we go. Welcome back, everyone. Some folks are still wrapping up their combo, so we will give them just a bit more time. How did it go? How did it go, Maris? Good stuff.
I think it went well. There was some very strong feelings. Some people thought that cereal was a soup. I couldn't really wrap my head around it, but I pushed back. But yeah, they were really getting at me. They were like, "No, it's a soup." I'm like, all right.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that it looks like the task or the game or exercise, I guess, exercise is the right word. It looks like it went really well for you all. And I hope that you found those 5 steps to be super easy and very straightforward. So you can put those on the ground in your classes tomorrow. Now we are going to hear from Felicia, who's going to talk about navigating extemporaneous speaking in office hours. Felicia, when you're ready, take it away, honey.
Yes. Thanks, Caitlin and Leah. That exercise was really fun. So I'm here today to go over how students can approach and prepare for office hours with professors. Office hours at times can seem daunting or intimidating at first, but it's a very critical skill to cultivate, especially early on in your college career. Professors are key individuals who can have a great impact in your class dynamic and learning. Therefore, you should take advantage of the time that they offer to help improve your learning experience, grade, and professional presence. So when you're meeting with your professor, there's a couple steps that you could take before the meeting, during the meeting, and post the meeting. So for before the meeting, navigating office hours with your professors can come through first preparing in a way that you are considering these following things. One, what do you want to get out of the meeting? Looking back at your class material and syllabus and saying, what are you concerned about are key elements to think about. And then say, why am I visiting my professor today? Once you have a clear outline of that, it's great to create an agenda. An agenda will help you stay organized and ensure that you stay on topic and check that all your needs are addressed during the meeting. Once you have the agenda, make sure when the meeting day actually comes that you bring certain items to the meeting. bringing a physical copy of your agenda, or if it's on your laptop, bringing the assignment, quiz, or exam you want to work on. That could also be a great reference for the professor to see in person. Something to take notes on, a notepad, using your pen, pencil, and then of course, having the syllabus or class reading as a reference. So during the meeting, first step is that you want to build a report. You could build a report by arriving to your meeting on time and ending the meeting in a timely fashion. This indicates that you are respecting your professor's time. Then you want to introduce yourself if it's needed. Sometimes this might be the first time you're meeting your professor or the first time meeting the professor in a long time. So go ahead and remind them of which class you're taking with them and why you are there. Dress in a comfortable yet in a presentable manner when you are going to see your professors, or if this is via Zoom. Get to know your professor's personal interests of just making sure you could break the ice when you are introducing yourself and introducing the topic that you're here for. And then ask questions about the professor's academic field, research, or hobbies before you dive into the reason you are there. Second, step 2, remind your professor of why you are visiting. Third step, clearly articulate the reason for your visit in the form of a question. Asking a question allows the professor to provide detailed information, advice, or solutions to your problem. You also have the greatest opportunity to articulate your perspective and concerns. The question pretty much opens the doors for the professor to have more responses to what's going on. And here are a few examples of questions you can ask. 1, I shared a document with you. Can you provide me some feedback? Can you take a look at this document and the document that the student would bring? Can you expand on this piece of feedback further? I want to be sure I understand your full meaning so I could make revisions. 4, this is how I came to this answer. Can you help me understand the correct answer? And then 5, do you have any opportunities for extra credit? With all these questions, it's good, again, to have your syllabus or class material as a direct reference. Step 4, after the meeting, to thank the professor for their time, insights, and support. A thank you letter, a thank you email can go a really long way for showing your professors your appreciation, and then you can make plans to follow up. You don't want to just leave the meeting within the room or within the Zoom call. Depending on the professor's input, you could follow up with another meeting. You can follow up during class, via email, or by agreeing to go see another resource, such as the library or CWS. In this degree, it just ensures that all of your answers are everything that you came for, and you're still getting the help you need after the meeting. Now that I have offered strategies on how to navigate a less formal space within your professor's meetings, Drisana is presenting next.
Okay, thanks, Felicia. I know office hours can be really stressful, but hopefully y'all feel a little bit better about visiting your professors and discussing any assignment. I'll be moving along to discuss panels in formal spaces. Panels usually involve a few people sharing their expert opinion or giving input based on a shared experience. And I know that panels can seem fun and low stakes, but there are a few ways that you can prepare, and I will be sharing this with you. So step 1 is to clearly identify your role. Are you the scientist, the policy person, the project manager? Sometimes you and your fellow panel members share a title, and you are identifying your role will remind the audience which group of people you are hearing from. And other times you want to distinguish yourself from the other panelists in order to emphasize what you are uniquely bringing to the table. And then step 2 is prepare and learn your content. So some panels will send questions beforehand, so be sure to prepare. This can look like reviewing your questions to get an idea of what you want to say, or you can just jot down a few notes if you prefer kind of that more guidance. If the panel does not send questions, you can just think back to the purpose of the panel and create a few generalized topics that you might want to discuss or anticipate discussing. Step 3 is to get to the panel beforehand and learn your space. And this can look like familiarizing yourself with the physical space you're in, as well as taking the temperature of the attendees and mingling with your other panelists. Learning your spaces and chatting with others will likely make you more comfortable and tackle some of those other pre-channel jitters. Speaking with other panelists will help you identify your own role by distinguishing the similarities and differences between you all. And then step 4 is engage in the panel. So that's kind of like, that's the purpose of being there. You can do this by first thanking the organizers or the host for the invitation, and then taking up space, but also being mindful of how much space you take up. You will be using discussion tips from earlier, like Leah and Caitlin showed, about point of connection, main point, significance, and just get out there. And then share some final words. You can say thank you, and then a few words about why the panel was important and what you contributed. And as you tackle these 4 points, this is also the time to utilize some of those super helpful speaking tips that we discussed in part 1 of this press series. Those tips include providing eye contact, keeping a consistent and confident tone, maintaining pace, utilizing appropriate gestures and movements. That was a lot, but I promise that if you just take the time, they will come to you a lot more naturally. And sometimes you're not always on the panel and you are attending a panel, which is also really fun. And if you're attending a panel and you have a question, here are some tips for asking that question. So if you think up your question in the middle of the panel, you can just jot that down really quickly, write it down for yourself so that you know what you want to ask and you're not rambling when it's time. And sometimes that question will be answered later on. You can just put a little check or smiley face next to the question that you wrote. And when it's time for questions, first provide a little context about what you're asking, and that can look like you making a point of connection between the question and something that the panelist specifically said. And then the big almighty ask your question. So you want to apply some of the speaking tips that I shared earlier, including maintaining tone, volume, and pace. I know that this isn't super high stakes when you're just asking a question, but you want to have some of those really great skills to make sure that you're just calm and chill and ready. So that was really it. I'm going to go through a super quick recap. If you are on a panel, identify your role, prep, be early, chat, and then engage. And if you have a question while attending a panel, write your questions down, provide context for your question, and then ask your questions. Next, Damaris will continue this conversation on formal spaces with a discussion on how to navigate lightning speeches and elevator pitches. So Damaris, all you.
All right, thank you, Drasana. Now that we have some more information on how to navigate panels in formal spaces, let's talk about some more of those instances where we'll have to articulate our ideas on the spot, such as conferences, networking events, and even in our classes. So before we get started though, I just want to mention most of the time when we think about articulating our research contributions, we're thinking of a formal space. However, when we articulate those contributions outside of those formal spaces, such as talking with your tutor in the beginning of an appointment, or even talking with your professor in office hours, we have to articulate our ideas without the use of those visual aids or speaker notes that we're used to in formal spaces. These less formal instances are known as elevator pitches and lightning talks. In both, you have to clearly and concisely give your audience a tour of who you are professionally, your research, and any of the ways that you can contribute to the work of the people that you are talking to. So you've probably heard of both lightning talks and elevator pitches, but we're going to identify some of the key differences between the two. So lightning talk is a short, succinct preview or a summary about your major research findings relating directly to your thesis or main ideas. To give you a better idea of what that would look like, consider some of the presentations you may have done in class where you just give an outline of maybe the end of the year research paper or a preview to your class. In that lightning talk, what you would do is share with your audience basically your main idea, thesis, or hypothesis, whatever it may be, and your reasoning for choosing the topic that you did. You also want to let them know what you found in your research so far and maybe your next steps. This is not a robust kind of presentation of our research, but it just gives the audience a sneak peek. All right, so slightly differing from the lightning talk, the elevator pitch covers more information about you rather than the contributions to your field. Instead of a preview about your major findings, an elevator pitch is a short, succinct advertisement about you. So rather than having the same elevator pitch for every event or every person you're talking to, you definitely want to tailor your pitch to the event, audience, or person that you are directly speaking to. For example, when I'm speaking to potential employers in Chicago, I oftentimes mention my high school. It's quote unquote some detection of academic ambition and success, along with how familiar you are with the city and what part of the city you're from. However, when I'm here in Atlanta and I'm talking to potential employers, I might mention Agnes Scott, but I'm not going to mention my high school because they have no idea what I'm talking about. So that's a minor example, but it goes to show you that some information in one pitch may not be essential for the next. And then keeping in mind, that you have to go to this networking event or this conference, you might want to do a little bit of preparation on the back end for your elevator pitch. To do that, you can go ahead and create maybe a quick outline of that pitch, and here's some of the information that you can include. So the first thing you want to include is information about yourself. These are things like your name, pronouns, major and minors, school. You may also share other information about yourself, such as your skills, employment status, and future career goals. The second thing you want to include is what you can offer. You might discuss a particular research opportunity or an internship that you have in the past. You want to be sure to discuss how that experience helped you grow academically and professionally, and be sure to only discuss experiences that you are comfortable with, because you might get some questions and you may have to elaborate a little more. So just be ready for that. And then the last thing you want to include is your call to action. Like, what are you here for? What do you want this person or audience to do for you? Clearly communicate to your audience how they can help you, and maybe like any ways that you can even help them. And then lastly, just this is for elevator pitches and lightning talks. In order to make sure it doesn't suddenly become a 10-minute full-blown conversation, because oftentimes these people are very short on time. You want to be sure to limit yourself to maybe no more than 2 or 3 sentences when articulating each of these things. So the information about yourself, what you can offer, and your call to action. You want to limit yourself to, as few sentences as possible. And then lastly, this is just a quick reminder, as with all presentations that we give, we have to keep our audience in mind. Like I mentioned in part 1 of the series, in selecting what to discuss in any of your presentations, you want to think about what emotions you want to invoke in your audience, as well as like what information is most relatable and important to them. And then also, it's always a good rule of thumb to know your audience and their trigger warnings that might prevent them from thoroughly engaging in your lightning talk or your elevator pitch. Okay, so that's the end of my section for today. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions at the end of our time today, but I'll pass it back to Lee and Caitlin to direct our Q&A session. Thank you.
Wow, friends, we've talked about so much. We articulate our ideas on the spot all of the time. But sometimes when we get in classes, or we're at a conference, right? Or we're in office hours with our professor, sometimes the anxiety really gets to us, and it makes it that much more difficult to really engage and to say the things that we really want to say without, feeling like we fumbled the ball, So I hope that having these steps is something that's going to be really helpful for you, and that you can actually take forward and put these skills on the ground. I know for myself, when I was, reviewing my notes for this presentation, like I was definitely taking, just tips from each of these sections to apply to my presentation with all of you tonight. So we're going to open the floor for questions. You can feel free to put those in the chat. We're going to man the chat and help answer any questions that you might have. Just a quick reminder before we do that, though, this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the YouTube channel for the Center for Writing and Speaking. And you'll have access to all of these slides so you can go back and see these steps again when you have more time. Okay, any questions? Oh, Gwen is giving us hand claps. Thanks, Gwen. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. I would love to see you all on one thing. Awesome. Are there any slides that you would like to go back and see? I can pull those up too.
I think I see a question in the chat here from Amina. It says, how do you stop habits that prevent you from speaking concisely? So, Amina, let me know if I'm interpreting the question correctly, but essentially you're asking, like, can we provide some habits so that way maybe we can stop rambling when we are like in class discussions? Is that what you mean? Or like when we are talking for too long? Let me know. You can type an answer in the chat too. Okay, so for when we're talking too long. Okay, I like that. That's a really good question. I've had a lot of interviews most recently in the past like couple of months, and for me, I think it's been really helpful, kind of using steps of what I need to get through in some sort of like interview process or in open class discussion. So recalling those 5 steps that Caitlin and I mentioned earlier today, like in my head, when I'm thinking about how do I speak concisely, I think, okay, let me check these kind of boxes off in my head. So let's say, okay, I start my answer. I want a point of connection, give some evidence, explain the significance of the evidence, moving on into kind of final comments, and then throwing it back out there for other people to speak. Like for me, having kind of like just a set structure in my mind helps me in any sort of context, because then I'm like, okay, I need to say these things. Obviously, they're going to change depending on the context, but if I get these things out, I know I've said something great, and then I'm chucking out of there, not wasting any time. Yeah. But I'll open up the floor for other tutors. Amaris?
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes to show how important it is to actually be familiar with the stuff that you're talking about, because then you can actually determine what's the main point here. Like what do I need to understand in order to understand this other piece of information? So I think the other part is doing a lot of preparation on the back end about really becoming familiar with your research and the work that you do.
Yeah, and I'll add on to this. I think one thing that really helps me know that, Caitlin, you're talking way too much, is when I start using filler words. So like, kind of, and so, and all of these little things that are connecting too many ideas together. That's how I know that I'm talking for too long. And I think this is something that I'm acutely aware of because I taught public speaking as a course over the summer, which was really nuts. But I did an exercise where we all sat together and we listened to each other talk, and we made tick marks for every time we used a filler word. And that really, stark reality of, oh, so I'm very keenly aware of when I start to use all those filler words and that's how I know when, okay, I'm probably doing a little too much. Let me give my final comments and invite somebody else to respond. So I hope those answers were helpful. Any other tutors want to chime in on that?
I could chime in. One, it depends. I use different tactics. Sometimes I feel like I'm a visual person, so I need to write down the points I'm going to say, and then I could say it's concise because I had it written down. Sometimes I need to read the crowd, so I read people's body language. If I see that people have confused faces, I know something is wrong. It's either I'm not explaining it right, or I'm explaining it in such a long way that I need to rethink this process. So those are 2 things that I try to work on.
Ooh, both of those are so good. And that first one was one that Amaris brought up in our first workshop of the year, writing across borders, specifically for the virtual environment. So come on, continuity. I love that, Felicia. Any more questions? Okay, well, lovely. I like to see it. Leah, you have something to say? Go ahead, sweetie.
Yeah, just in case anybody wanted a little bit more time to think of a question, we just wanted to plug some resources in here because obviously we know this is just an hour-long workshop, and so we talked about a lot of things. But as we said before, kind of the overall umbrella was figuring out how we present ourselves, our research with like out the visual aids, right? And so obviously we are, as Center for Writing and Speaking Tutors are here for you. You can practice with us, but we did talk specifically about elevator pitches and lightning talks, and the career pairs, our other fellow tutors, are also extremely equipped to do those things for you as well and to help tutor you through that process, as well as their bosses, the career advisors. So please feel free to check them out as well in the Office of Internship and Career Development. Just wanted to plug some more resources for you too.
Okay, well, if all hearts and minds are in order, there's no reason to stay longer than we have to. I wish you all the best of luck as you push through the end of the semester. I know you can do it. I know you're tired, but I know you can do it. The Center for Writing and Speaking is here to support you every step of the way. And stay on the lookout for the recording of this workshop and the slide presentation and everything like that in the Irvine next week, okay? We'll hang around for a few minutes afterwards if you think of some more questions, but we really wish you the rest of the semester. Finish it strong, y'all. We can do it. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for coming. Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Bye. Cuties.